Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are wading into waters that I think for most of us feel a little bit like drowning.
hmm
We are talking about a phrase that just dominates the headlines. It fills up our social media feeds. And let's be honest, it probably raises your blood pressure just hearing it.
It definitely triggers a visceral reaction. It's that, tightness in the chest you get when you open Twitter or X or whatever, and you just see everyone screaming.
We are talking about the culture war,
Right.
and the mission for this deep dive is it's a bit different than usual.
Right.
Usually when people talk about this, they want to argue in the war. They want to debate the latest outrage, the banned book, the protest, the tweet of the day. We aren't doing that.
No, we are not here to fight the war. We are here to look at the map.
Yes.
We want to take the back off the wash and see the gears turning. We want to understand the machinery.
Because when I was going through the stack of research for this, and we have a massive stack today, listeners, ranging from 19th century German history to modern algorithmic studies, global political science, I realized something. I realized I didn't actually know what this thing was. Is it organic? Do we all just naturally hate each other now? Or is this a machine? Is it a strategy?
And that is the central question. It
Yeah.
really is. And the answer, as we go through the sources, it points heavily toward machine.
Right.
It's a manufactured phenomenon with a history, a structure, and a surprisingly large global footprint.
And spoiler alert, it did not start on Facebook.
No, far from it.
So let's start at the very beginning. Before we even get into the history, we need a working definition.
Good idea.
Because culture war is one of those terms that gets thrown around so loosely, it almost loses its meaning. When the sources define it, what are we actually looking at?
So, stripped of all the buzzwords, the core definition we're working with is that a culture war is a conflict, often metaphorical, but
Yeah.
sometimes very real between social groups. Okay.
But here's the key part. It's not just a disagreement. It is a struggle to politically impose a specific ideology or a set of values on mainstream society.
That word impose feels like the heavy lifter there. It's not just, I like chocolate, you like vanilla.
Exactly. I like chocolate, you like vanilla is pluralism. That's a healthy society.
Yeah.
You do your thing, I do my thing.
Right.
A culture war is your preference for vanilla is an existential threat to the nation, and I need to pass laws to make sure vanilla is marginalized. It's a struggle for dominance.
It's a struggle for reality.
It is. It's about defining reality. It's taking a private preference or a moral belief and weaponizing it into a public policy requirement.
Right, turning your taste into my law.
Precisely. And in doing so, it creates what sociologists call a cleavage in society.
Which sounds painful.
It is painful. It's a split. And the goal of the people waging these wars on either side is often to make sure that split is as wide and, as unbridgeable as possible.
They want a canyon. They want you to feel that you cannot possibly coexist with a person on the other side of that canyon.
Okay, so if that's the mechanism imposing values to create a split, where does it come from? If I ask the average person on the street, when did the culture war start? They'd probably say the 1960s.
Right. Woodstock, hippies.
Vietnam, the counterculture, all of that.
That's the standard answer.
Right.
Or maybe they'd point to the 1990s with Newt Gingrich and the Contract with America.
But the research took us back a lot further to a place in time I really, really did not expect. We are talking about 1870s Germany.
Yes. We have to talk about the Kulturkampf.
That's just the German word for culture war, right?
It is. The English phrase we use today is what linguists call a calque. It's a loan translation. We literally just translated Kulturkampf. Kultur meaning culture, Kampf meaning struggle or war.
But they weren't fighting about gender pronouns or gas stoves in 1871 Berlin.
No.
What was the original culture war about?
It was a heavyweight title fight between two massive powers. In one corner, you had the newly unified German Empire, led by the Iron Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck.
Okay.
In the other corner, you had the Catholic Church, led by Pope Pius IX.
Bismarck versus the Pope. That is high stakes. That's like Godzilla versus Kong for the 19th century.
Extremely high stakes. And you have to understand the context. Germany had just become a nation-state in 1871.
Right, brand new.
Bismarck is obsessed with unity. He wants a strong, modern, secular state where everyone speaks German and salutes the Kaiser. And he looks at the Catholic Church, which makes up about a third of the population, and he sees a problem.
What's the problem? They're just going to church, aren't they?
Bismarck didn't see it that way. He saw a group of people whose ultimate loyalty wasn't to the Kaiser or the German Constitution,
But to Rome,
but to a foreign power. The Vatican. He called them Reichsfeinde,
which means
enemies of the empire. He believed that if push came to shove, a good Catholic would listen to the Pope, not the Chancellor.
So it was a question of sovereignty. Who's really in charge here?
Precisely. So he launched the Kulturkampf. And this wasn't just, rhetoric or mean tweets. He passed what were called the May Laws.
The May Laws.
The state took control of educating the clergy. They established a special court for ecclesiastical affairs. They made civil marriage mandatory, taking that power away from the church.
Wow.
At the height of this, almost all the Catholic bishops in Prussia were either imprisoned or in exile.
So when we talk about culture war today being nasty, it's not imprisoning bishops nasty? Not yet.
Not quite, but the dynamic is identical. It was a secular, modernizing state trying to break the power of traditional religious authority.
And there's another layer to this that often gets missed, which I found really interesting in the note.
The ethnic element.
The Polish connection.
Right. A lot of the Catholics in the Prussian territories were ethnic Poles. So for Bismarck, attacking the church was also a way to suppress Polish nationalism and force Germanization.
Which sounds eerily familiar to modern debates. It's never just about the stated issue, is it?
Never.
It's about identity, ethnicity, and who belongs in the nation.
That is the DNA of the culture war. It's always about who gets to define the soul of the nation.
Right.
Is Germany a secular Protestant empire? Or is there room for Polish Catholics? Bismarck said no.
So the term exists in the 1870s. How does it get to America? Does it just hop on a boat?
It hybridated for a long time. The term would pop up in obscure academic papers or newspapers in the 1920s and 40s, usually referring back to Germany, but it wasn't something regular people said.
An intellectual curiosity?
Exactly.
But the feeling, the dynamic that arrived in the U.S. way before the word did, the sources point to the 1920s as the first real American culture war.
And the parallels between the 1920s and the 2020s are actually staggering.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If you look at the societal pressures, it's almost a mirror image.
Okay, set the scene for us.
All right, so you have the Roaring 20s, World War I is over. You have this massive explosion of technology and urbanization, radios, cars, movies.
Yeah.
And for the first time in American history, more Americans live in cities than in the countryside.
And the cities are where the sin is.
In the eyes of the rural traditionalists, yes. The cities had jazz, they had flappers with short hair and short skirts, they had speakeasies.
All the fun stuff.
And crucially, they had immigrants. Millions of Catholics and Jews arriving from Southern and Eastern Europe.
So the rural Protestant majority feels besieged.
They feel like they're losing their country. They feel like their values are being eroded by these aliens in the cities who drink alcohol and listen to syncopated music. So you get a massive backlash.
And this is the era of Prohibition.
This is the era of Prohibition, which we often think of as a health thing, but it was a direct culture war attack on the drinking habits of urban immigrants.
The German beer halls, the Irish pubs.
Exactly. And you also see the resurgence of the KKK in the 20s, but not just as anti-Black. In this era, they were explicitly anti-Catholic and anti-immigrant.
Right.
They were trying to enforce a 100% Americanism that was Protestant and rural.
And this all culminated in an election that sounds like a total nightmare. 1928, Al Smith.
Oh, poor Al Smith. He was the perfect villain for the culture warriors of the time.
He was the Democratic nominee.
And he was the governor of New York, the ultimate city slicker. He wanted to end Prohibition, and most damning of all, he was Catholic.
The first Catholic major party nominee.
And the attacks on him were just vicious. We think fake news is new.
No.
People circulated pamphlets claiming that the Pope was going to build a tunnel from Rome to the White House to give Smith his daily orders.
A tunnel under the Atlantic Ocean.
The literal tunnel.
It's funny, we look back at that now and laugh about the tunnel, but people really believed it.
They did.
It speaks to the level of fear.
It taps into that primal fear of foreign influence, and Smith got absolutely crushed.
Right.
The country wasn't ready. The traditional forces won that battle, but the divide between urban modernists and rural traditionalists, it never went away. It just simmered.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. We move through the mid-century, and we have to talk about a group that keeps popping up in our research like a bad penny.
Yes.
The John Birch Society.
The John Birch Society is like the Kevin Bacon of right-wing conspiracy theories. Everything connects back to them.
Who were they?
Founded in 1958 by Robert Welch. They were ostensibly an anti-communist group, but they were extreme. I mean, truly extreme.
How so?
They believed that President Eisenhower, a five-star general, the hero of D-Day, was a secret communist agent.
Eisenhower, the guy who built the highway system,
A commie.
in their world, yes. They believed there was a massive internal conspiracy to destroy American sovereignty and values. They thought the civil rights movement was a communist plot.
And water fluoridation.
And water fluoridation, yes. And while they were marginalized by mainstream Republicans for a while, their ideas, they didn't die.
The sources trace a direct line from them to the modern Christian right.
It's a straight line. You can trace the personnel and the tactics from the John Birch Society to people like Phyllis Schlafly. She was the anti-feminist icon, right? The one who stopped the Equal Rights Amendment.
Correct. And she started her career promoting John Birch Society literature. Then you have Tim LaHaye, who wrote the massive best-selling Left Behind series about the rapture.
Sure.
He was deeply influenced by this Bircher style of paranoia, the idea that the world is divided into us, the faithful, and them, the conspirators, globalists.
So they built the infrastructure, they built the mailing lists, they built the sense of persecution.
Yes.
But we still don't have the name yet. When does culture war become a household term in the United States?
1991, the pivot point.
Enter James Davison Hunter.
James Davison Hunter is a sociologist at the University of Virginia, and he publishes a book called Culture Wars, The Struggle to Define America. And this book hits the intellectual scene like a bomb because he finally gave a name to what everyone was feeling.
What was his big insight? Because he wasn't just saying people disagree, he was saying something fundamental had changed in the American landscape.
Right. His thesis was that the old lines of division in America were dissolving. For most of history, the divide was denominational Protestant versus Catholic versus Jew, or was economic labor versus capital. Hunter said no. The new divide is ideological. He called it progressivism versus orthodoxy.
Okay, break those down. What does he mean by orthodoxy in this context?
Orthodoxy, in Hunter's definition, is the belief that moral truth is external, transcendent, and unchangeable.
Fixed.
It is fixed. It comes from God or Scripture or natural law. You don't get to vote on it. It was true in 1890, and it is true in 1990.
And progressivism.
Progressivism is the belief that moral truth is an ongoing process. It evolves. We discover it through reason, science, and social change.
It's adaptable.
It's adaptable. As society learns more, our morals should shift.
And his key observation, which I found really fascinating, was about who ends up sharing a foxhole in this new war.
Yes, this is the aha moment of the whole book.
Right.
He pointed out that an Orthodox Jew, an Orthodox Catholic, and an evangelical Protestant suddenly found that they had more in common with each other than they did with the progressive members of their own faiths.
That's the realignment. The Orthodox Jew and the evangelical agree on the nature of truth, even if their theology differs on the details.
Exactly. They both agree that there is a book, and the book says X. Meanwhile, the Reformed Jew and the liberal Protestant agree that the book is a metaphor, and we need to update our views.
And because they disagree on the nature of reality, they clash on everything else.
Everything. Abortion, gun politics, separation of church and state, privacy, drug use, homosexuality, censorship. Hunter argued these aren't separate arguments.
No.
They are battles in a single war over who gets to define reality. Is reality fixed by God or defined by us?
Now, there's another theory in the stack about why this exploded in the early 90s specifically, and it's a psychological one involving the Cold War. This is from historian Kristen Kobes-Dumez.
This is one of my favorite insights in the research because it explains the timing. It's the vacuum theory.
Tell us about the vacuum.
So, for 40 years, from the late 40s to 1989, American conservatives, and specifically evangelicals, had a clear, terrifying enemy. The Soviet Union.
Godless communism.
Right. It was an existential threat. It could end the world.
It was easy to rally the troops. We have to be strong to fight the Reds.
Very easy. And Dumez argues that they constructed a specific identity around that. They championed strict masculine gender roles and the traditional nuclear family, not just because the Bible said so, but because they viewed it as a defense strategy.
A strong father protects the nation from communism.
Softness equals death. The family unit was the bunker.
But then 1991 comes along, the Berlin Wall is down, the Soviet Union collapses. We won.
We won. But for a movement built on fighting an existential threat, victory is a catastrophe.
Right.
If the dragon is dead, what does the dragon slayer do? The external threat vanished. The defining antagonist that held the coalition together was gone.
So they needed a new dragon.
Exactly. Dumez argues that the leadership transferred that threat perception. They took all that fear, all that organizational energy, and that militant mindset, and they turned it inward.
The call is coming from inside the house.
Literally. The new threat wasn't nuclear missiles. It was feminism. It was gay rights. It was secular humanism. They framed these domestic changes as just as dangerous to the nation's survival as the Soviets had been.
Wow.
They argued that moral rot would destroy America just as surely as a nuclear bomb.
And that sets the stage perfectly for the declaration of war, 1992.
The 1992 Republican National Convention in Houston.
I looked up the video of this speech, Pat Buchanan. It is intense.
It's legendary.
It doesn't look like a modern political speech. It looks like a sermon from a pulpit.
Well, remember, Buchanan had run against the sitting president, George H.W. Bush, in the primary. He represented the insurgent, paleoconservative wing.
Right.
He lost, but he got a primetime speaking slot to unite the party. He did not give a let's-all-get-along speech.
No, he threw a grenade. He said, and I'm quoting here, "There is a religious war going on in our country for the soul of America.
Chills.
It is a cultural war, as critical to the kind of nation we will one day be, as was the Cold War itself."
There it is. He explicitly links it to the Cold War. He's telling the base, the war isn't over, the battlefield just changed.
And he listed the targets: environmentalists, feminists, abortion, homosexual rights. He basically said, if you aren't with us, you are against America.
It was a watershed moment. Strategically, it's debated. Many political scientists think it actually hurt George H.W. Bush in the short term.
How so?
It made the party look angry and exclusionary, and moderate suburban women drifted toward Bill Clinton.
But in the long term?
In the long term, it worked. It energized the base. It proved that culture war rhetoric motivates the core voters. It gets people to the polls. 2 years later, in 1994, the Republicans took control of Congress for the first time in 40 years.
The Republican Revolution.
Driven largely by this cultural angst.
And one of the specific battles in that 94 era was the history wars, which, again, reading the notes, I felt like I was reading a newspaper from today.
The debate over the national history standards.
Right. You had Dick Cheney's wife, attacking these proposed education standards. She said they were too depressing.
Right.
Too much about slavery, the KKK, the Great Depression. She wanted celebratory history.
And the other side wanted critical history.
It's the exact same script.
It is. The question was, should history class be about building patriotism and myths? Or should it be an honest accounting of failures? It is the exact same debate we are having today about critical race theory or the 1619 Project.
The script hasn't changed in 30 years.
Only the acronyms have.
It really does feel like we are stuck in a loop.
We are. Because the underlying value clash, imposing one view of the nation over the other, hasn't been resolved.
Okay, so that's the history. We know where it came from. But now I want to get to the part of the outline that challenges the whole premise. Segment 4. Is this war even real?
This is where we have to put on our skepticism hats.
Because there is a school of thought that says we normal people actually get along fine.
Right. This is the Wolf thesis. Political scientist Alan Wolf wrote a book in the late 90s called One Nation, After All.
Okay.
He went out and did qualitative interviews with middle-class Americans in the suburbs, and he found that they weren't screaming at each other. They were pragmatic. They were moderate.
They were tolerant.
Yes. He argued that the culture war was a myth invented by elites. It was politicians and cable news hosts screaming for ratings, while real people just wanted to mow their lawns, raise their kids, and get along with their neighbors.
That sounds nice. Is it still true?
That's the scary part. The data suggests Wolf was right then, but he's wrong now.
What changed?
The conflict trickled down. We have sorted. A meta-analysis of data from 1992 to 2012 showed that culture war attitudes have become foundational elements of people's belief systems.
Meaning what?
It used to be that you picked a political party because of your union, or your taxes, or your family tradition. And maybe you disagreed with the party on abortion or guns, but you stayed.
Sure.
Now it's the opposite. If you have a strong view on guns or abortion, you pick your party based on that. You even pick your church based on your politics.
So we are stacking our identities. All the flags are the same color.
Yes. And that means we don't just disagree with the other side. We don't know them. We don't live near them. We don't worship with them. We have physically and socially sorted ourselves into two different countries.
But there's still this element of fabrication. The idea that someone wants us to be fighting.
E.J. Dionne has this great quote. He said, "The division is between those who want to have a culture war and those who don't."
Who wants a culture war? Who benefits from us being angry?
People who need to mobilize a base but don't have popular economic policies.
Okay.
Or organizations that need to raise money. Sociologist Scott Meltzer did a fascinating deep dive on the NRA, the National Rifle Association.
I thought the NRA was just about gun safety originally.
It was. For a long time, it was a sportsman's club. Hunting, marksmanship, safety, conservation. But Meltzer argues they intentionally pivoted to a culture war footing in the late 70s.
How?
They started framing gun ownership not as a hobby, but as a proxy for freedom, for masculinity, and for real America.
They're coming for your guns.
Exactly. They created a narrative of victimization. Elites in Washington want to take your heritage away. This creates a much tighter bond than, I like shooting targets.
Right.
It creates an in-group and an out-group. And once you have an out-group, you can mobilize people and raise money.
Fear pays better than hobbies.
Much better.
The notes also mention focus on the family, doing something similar with the media.
Yes. Susan B. Ridgely writes about how Focus on the Family realized that if their followers watched mainstream news, CBS, NBC, they might hear perspectives that softened their views or normalized liberal ideas.
So they built an alternative news ecosystem.
Radio shows, magazines, yes. They told their followers, the mainstream media is lying to you. We are the only source of truth. They depicted the traditional family as being under constant siege.
That is the precursor to the social media bubbles we live in today.
It's the direct ancestor. They bifurcated reality. You create a closed loop where your followers only hear what you want them to hear.
Now, this leads to a theory that might upset some people, but it's in the data, the asymmetry thesis.
This is from political scientists Grossman and Hopkins. It's essential for understanding why the two parties talk past each other.
What's the theory?
They argue that the two parties are not mirror images. They are structurally different beasts. The Republican Party, they argue, functions as an ideological movement.
Meaning
it is organized around a core set of conservative principles. Small government, tradition, liberty. It's easier to unify an ideological movement around abstract culture war ideas like freedom or the flag. The messaging is top-down and cohesive.
And the Democrats?
The Democratic Party functions as a coalition of social groups. You have labor unions, you have environmentalists, you have black voters, you have LGBTQ activists, you have urban professionals.
It's a big tent.
A very big, messy tent. And these groups often don't agree with each other. A union pipe fitter might not agree with an environmental activist. A conservative black churchgoer might not agree with an LGBTQ activist.
So it's harder to get everyone on the same page.
It is much harder for Democrats to wage a coherent culture war because they are trying to herd cats. Republicans are marching in formation.
So Republicans are structurally better equipped to fight these battles.
Correct, which is why they often initiate them. They have the machinery to keep the message disciplined.
Let's move into the modern era, the digital age. Segment 5. How did the internet change the machinery?
Well, if the 90s was the declaration of war, the internet was the distribution of weapons to everyone.
We have to talk about the Great Awakening.
This is Jonathan Haidt's term. Around 2012, we see a massive spike in terms like privilege, microaggression, and oppression in media usage.
Right.
This coincided with the rise of social media. Young progressives started using these platforms to call out injustice.
Cancel culture.
Depending on who you ask, yes. It was a new form of activism, and it produced a reaction.
The own the libs phenomenon.
This is crucial. Political analyst Nicole Hemmer points out that owning the libs became a substitute for actual ideology.
How so?
During the Cold War, conservatives had cohesive policy platforms about taxes or foreign policy. Today, for many online, the platform is the anger of the opponent.
If the liberals are mad, I must be doing something right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anger of the other side is the victory condition. It's effective polarization. It's based on feelings, not policy. I vote for the guy who makes the people I hate scream.
And pop culture became the battlefield. We have to talk about Gamergate 2014.
Oh, 2014 is a year that lives in infamy for internet historians.
I remember it happening, and I remember being so confused. It was about video game journalism ethics.
Ostensibly, that was the cover story.
Yeah.
But really, it was a test run for the modern political landscape. It was a backlash by a group of mostly young, white, male gamers against what they saw as the intrusion of feminist and progressive values into their hobby.
Keep politics out of my games.
Right. But the reaction was incredibly toxic. Harassment, doxing, death threats against female developers and critics. It was a mob.
And this is where Steve Bannon enters the chat.
Steve Bannon, who was running Breitbart News at the time and would go on to run Donald Trump's campaign, looked at Gamergate. And he didn't see a bunch of angry kids. He saw a gold mine.
He saw an army.
He literally said, you can come in through Gamergate and then get turned on to politics and Trump. He realized that these young men felt displaced. They felt like their culture was being taken away
So he could harness that grievance.
and weaponize it politically. It's
Right.
terrifyingly brilliant. You take people's passions, their movies, their games, their Star Wars, and you turn that passion into political rage.
And because people care more about their hobbies than they do about the marginal tax rate.
It works. Pop culture is the last front. That's why we fight about The Little Mermaid or Barbie now. It's all part of the war.
Okay, we've been very U.S.-centric so far. But as we promised in the intro, this is a global disease. Let's look at the global fronts. Segment 6.
Let's start with Australia, because they have something they explicitly call the history wars.
I found this fascinating. It was a battle between two prime ministers.
Yes. In the 90s and early 2000s, Paul Keating from the Labour Party versus John Howard from the Liberal National Coalition. And the battlefield was the country's origin story.
What was the disagreement?
Keating wanted to face the dark past. He gave the famous Redfern Park speech, admitting that white settlers committed murders, stole land, and stole children from Aboriginal families. He wanted a clear-eyed view of history.
Okay. And Howard?
John Howard pushed back hard. He coined the term black armband history. He said, "I don't want Australians wearing a black armband of mourning forever. We should be proud of our achievements."
And he refused to apologize.
He refused to issue an official apology to the stolen generations. He used a phrase that we hear in the U.S. all the time now regarding reparations: intergenerational guilt.
Right. I didn't do it.
He argued that current Australians shouldn't feel guilty for the sins of their ancestors.
And this war is still hot in Australia.
Extremely. Just recently, in 2023, they had the voice referendum, a vote to give Indigenous people a constitutional voice in Parliament. It failed.
Wow.
And the rhetoric around it was pure culture war. We're also seeing a backlash against welcome to country ceremonies, which are like land acknowledgements.
And in Australia, climate change is part of this too, right?
Oh, hugely. In Australia, accepting climate science is seen by the right as a sign of being a city elite. It's a badge of identity to deny it. It's not about the thermometer. It's about whose team you are on.
Let's hop to Europe. What does the culture war look like there?
In Europe, it's often about memory laws.
Meaning the government legislating how you remember history.
Yes. Look at Poland. The Law and Justice Party, PS, passed laws that effectively criminalized the phrase Polish death camps.
Right.
They wanted to ensure the narrative was that Poland was solely a victim of Nazi Germany, never a collaborator.
Even though history is messy and there were collaborators.
Correct. But the state wants a clean nationalist narrative. We were the heroes' victims.
And we see this with statues, too.
Statues are flashpoints everywhere. In the UK, you had the statue of slave trader Edward Colston thrown into the harbor. In Poland, in Ukraine, they are tearing down Soviet war memorials.
Which is complicated, right? Because the Soviets drove out the Nazi.
Exactly. Some older generations see those statues as symbols of liberation from Hitler, but younger nationalists see them as symbols of Soviet oppression.
A different kind of occupation.
Yes. In Ukraine, de-Russification is in full swing, renaming streets, removing Lenin. It's a war over public space. Who gets to stand at the town square?
Who owns the past owns the future.
It's true. Even in Vienna recently, they rejected a monument to a Polish king, Jan Sobieski, who saved Vienna from the Ottomans in 1683.
Why? He's a hero in Vienna, isn't he?
It was. But the city government feared that putting up a statue of a Christian king fighting the Turks would be used to incite Islamophobia and anti-Turkish sentiment today.
So history is held hostage by current politics.
Always.
Now, the most disturbing global example in our stack, I think, is Africa. Because this isn't just organic conflict. This looks like an export.
Political scientist Constance G. Anthony calls it neocolonialism.
That's a heavy word. How does she justify that?
She argues that the U.S., specifically U.S. conservatives, exported their culture war to Africa.
How?
Money and strings attached to aid. Under the Bush administration, HIV/AIDS relief, PEPFAR, was often tied to evangelical leadership and abstinence-only programs.
Okay.
Then, under Obama, aid was sometimes tied to LGBTQ tolerance.
So African nations became a proxy battlefield for American policy fights.
Yes. And the result has been intense polarization. Zambian scholars argue that American religious conservatives, feeling like they were losing the battle on gay marriage in the U.S., poured resources into Africa to hold the line there.
So they are fighting the war in Uganda because they lost in New York.
Essentially. And they frame it as resisting a Western gay agenda, which is deeply ironic because the anti-gay rhetoric is often imported from the Western Christian right.
It's a hall of mirrors.
It is. And now we see disinformation flooding West Africa. QAnon theories, anti-vax conspiracies. Studies show this is being pushed by American, French, and pro-Russian actors.
So a guy in Nigeria is reading QAnon theories that were invented to influence a swing voter in Michigan.
It's a globalized marketplace of outrage.
Okay, bring it back to the present day. Segment 7. What is on the laundry list right now? If we look at the map today, where are the fires burning?
It's a rapid-fire list. Gender and sexuality are number 1. Trans rights, drag queen story hours. The term groomer has been weaponized to conflate education with abuse.
Then education.
Critical race theory. Book bans, or expurgation, as some are calling it. The homeschooling movement, which is about withdrawing from the corrupt public system.
And public health. We can't ignore what happened during COVID.
The mask. The mask became the ultimate culture war symbol.
Oh, yeah.
It ceased to be a piece of fabric to stop a virus. It became a uniform. If you wore it, you were a liberal sheep. If you didn't, you were a selfish conservative.
I remember the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, literally begging people to stop making masks a senseless culture war issue. He was almost crying.
And it didn't work. Because once the machine decides something is a symbol, logic leaves the room.
This feeds into what the sources call the feedback loop.
Right. A 2023 study showed that disinformation actors know we are primed to fight. So they intentionally toss in polarizing claims, fake stories, exaggerated outrage, because they know we will pick them up.
We use the lies as rhetorical ammunition.
Exactly. We parrot the disinformation because it helps us win the argument. The utility of the lie is more important than the truth of the lie.
That is grim.
It is. But recognizing it is the first step.
So let's try to land this plane. We've been on a journey. Bismarck's Prussia, the Roaring Twenties, the Cold War vacuum, Gamergate, the global export to Africa. It's a massive, sprawling beast.
It is.
But if we synthesize all of this, if we try to find the so what is the takeaway for the listener?
For me, the takeaway is that culture war is rarely just about the issue on the surface. It is a political technology. It is a tool used to create in-groups and out-groups. When policy differences aren't enough to unite a base, or when the world gets too complex, you manufacture a cultural threat.
It's about identity. It's about saying, I am this kind of person, and that person over there is an existential threat to my way of life.
And in a world of information overload, that binary friend versus enemy is a very comforting way to organize the world. It's simpler than dealing with complex tax codes or healthcare trade-offs. It feels good to be a soldier in a righteous war.
So here is the provocative final thought for our listeners to mull over today. We've established that this is a machine. It's driven by elites, amplified by algorithms, and funded by special interests.
Right.
So if the culture war is a tool used to consolidate power or attention, at what point does participating in it stop being a defense of your values and start being just a manipulation of your identity?
That is the question. Are you fighting for what you believe in? Or are you just a foot soldier in someone else's strategy game?
Next time you see that outrage bait in your feed, maybe pause. Look for the strings. Look for the culture camps.
Stay skeptical.
Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Stay curious, stay critical, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.